Hello, and welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today's video is part of a series I do where I compare books with their movie adaptation. And before we get into the book and movie, I want to warn you that there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie, so if you plan on reading the book or watching the movie, you should do that first, and then come back and watch this video. I also want to tell you that this is available as a podcast. I will link to Spotify and Apple down below because those are the two most popular platforms, but I am on other platforms as well. So these tend to be about 30 minutes, but especially if they're longer and it works better for you to listen to it, that is available. And I also want to say that even though my podcast is called Why the Book Wins, I do love movies as well, and there are times where the movie wins when comparing book versus movie. So it is not always the book, because I do love movies, and oftentimes, before I even started this podcast, the reason I would read a book was because I liked the movie, and so I wanted to read the book for it. And so I love both, essentially, and I think I give a fair view of both book and movie, despite my name being Why the Book Wins. Anyway, thank you for clicking on this video. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, let's get right into the book versus movie. Hi, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. We are here to talk about Matchstick Man, which is a book written by Eric Garcia, published in 2002. And then the movie Matchstick Man was directed by Ridley Scott and was released in 2003. And by the way, this is the second Ridley Scott book versus movie I have covered. I covered House of Gucci last year, so I will link to that if you are interested. I would also like to cover The Last Duel. I meant to do it when it had come out, and then I just didn't, and I still haven't, but that one should be happening sometime this year. And then to give a summary for Matchstick Men, we have Roy, who is a con artist with OCD and anxiety. The doctor he usually gets his medicine from has just abruptly left town, and after he suffers a very bad episode, his partner Frank sets him up with a doctor that he knows, like a psychiatrist he knows, because his mom had used this doctor. In the movie, he says it's his aunt. But anyway, it's a doctor he knows. And so he sets Roy up to go meet this therapist, and he does, and this new therapist starts giving him new medication. And while talking to this therapist, we learn about Roy's past relationship, a woman named Heather, and how she left him when she was pregnant, and how he's always kind of wondered, like, do I have a child out there? And with the help of this doctor, Dr. Klein, he finds out he does have a 14-year-old daughter named Angela. He starts spending time with Angela, and the two of them become very close, and he starts teaching her the con, even though he's hesitant at first. And he also realizes at one point that the medicine the Dr. Klein has been giving him isn't even real medication, and that really it's Angela that has been helping him just be happier and lighter and calmer, and it's been easing his symptoms. And so he decides he wants to get part custody of Angela, and in order to do so, he needs to go straight and quit being a con artist. So he talks to his partner Frank about this, and Frank is very accepting of this. He does ask that they pull one last big con so that Frank can have a bit of a nest egg while he figures out, what to do from here, to which Roy agrees. And in the last con, things do not go as planned as far as Roy is concerned. And long story short, we learn that Frank has been conning Roy the whole time, and that Angela is not even his real daughter, and that Dr. Klein is not a real doctor, and they have all been in on it together to steal Roy's huge savings account, and he is left penniless. And it's not the book's fault that I went into this already having seen the movie. And so I knew that Angela wasn't his real daughter and that Frank was conning him. And so I knew what the big reveal was going to be. And so I think if I had read this going in blind, not knowing, I would have given it a higher rating. But because I did know, it did kind of take away from the reading experience, I thought. But there have been books I've read where I knew the twist, I knew the reveal, and yet the reading experience was still fantastic. So maybe that's a test to see how well a book really is written, especially books that rely on twists and reveals. If you can read it already knowing the twist or reveal and you still love it, like that's a testament to how great the book really is. Right? And this book, it was good. I know I sound like I'm hating on it, but I did enjoy the book. I just think a lot of the power comes from that ending when you realize the truth. But yeah, I was still interested the entire time. I never got bored. So there is that. And I did enjoy learning about Roy's character. We don't see much into any of the other characters, like to see into Frank, his partner, or Angela. We can't see things from their perspective, because if we did see it from their perspective, we would find out that they're conning Roy. And so Garcia couldn't have told us their perspectives. And so we only get a look at Roy. And he was interesting though, and I thought he was an interesting character, and I enjoyed reading about him. And he did have some scenes in the book where you just really feel the anxiety he's feeling. And there is some comedy in there too, which, is reflected in the movie. The scene when he's at the pharmacy because he's all out of his meds and he goes to he's waiting in line to see the pharmacist to tell him he needs these pills. And that's when he finds out they're not even real medicine. But that whole scene I thought was really well written. And so that's like one scene that stands out when I think back on this book. Onto the movie. I saw this movie shortly after it came out. We saw it on DVD, so it wasn't in theater. So it was after it had come out on DVD, which that's like almost 20 years ago now. And I don't think I had seen the movie since then. And yet, even though it's been nearly 20 years since I've seen this, I have never forgotten the reveal at the end that it was Frank and Angela conning him, because I remember being so shocked by the ending of this movie, and it has stuck with me forever. I forgot a lot of the details, but that reveal I never forgot. And Ridley Scott, he's a director that I'm impressed with just the wide variety of movies he has, because there's some directors where you can tell you're watching one of their movies, either by the style, the way in which it's filmed, or even like the story, because some directors just tell the same sort of stories to some extent. Or even the actors, they'll use the same actors a lot of the time, so you can be like, oh, this, you can just tell by the vibe that this is a movie done by so-and-so. And that is not the case for me with Ridley Scott. Like, his movies are just so all over the place and so varied. He's like a great director, and so it's just impressive, I think. Not to say there's anything bad about directors having that vibe where you can tell it's them, because I love that too. Anyway, I was just surprised. I had no idea this was Ridley Scott until I watched it again. Steven Spielberg was actually originally attached to direct this, but then he had to back out in order to do Catch Me If You Can, which is also based on a book, and I have covered that. So if you're interested in book versus movie for Catch Me If You Can, I will link to that as well. And this movie, yeah, it's really well done. And I talked about how the book did a really good job showing us the anxiety Roy feels. And a lot of lines from the movie are straight from the book. Like when he talks about how he thought about, blowing his brains out, then he's worried about what it would do to the carpet, and just that whole monologue is from the book. But I also love the scene when in the beginning they're conning that couple, and then the woman opens the sliding glass door, and the way it's shot, like the colors and the angles, and just like how Roy doesn't like that she opened that window and is letting the outdoors in. And yeah, just a lot of quick cuts and weird angles and the colorization. So yeah, really well done. And I'll just say right off the bat that I love this movie. And one of those reasons is the cast is incredible. We have Nicolas Cage, who is perfect as Roy. And Nicolas Cage, he's such an interesting actor because he won an Academy Award, and yet he's also known for just being really terrible at times, like terrible acting and terrible movies. However, I was happy how, last year with the movie Pig, that really people started to admire him again and respect his acting, because he is incredible in Pig. If you have not seen that movie, you have to watch it. It is so good. I really like Nicolas Cage, and he was amazing in this. And then we have Sam Rockwell in the role of Frank, his partner. And actually, the reason I'm even covering this Matchstick Men is because I covered Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which again, I will link to if you want to watch that one. And that has Sam Rockwell. And while I was watching that, I was like, man, I love Sam Rockwell. I've loved him for a while now, and yet I have never covered him on the podcast. And so seeing him in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy made me want to cover more with him. And so I was looking through his IMDb to find what movies of his are based on books, and I came across Matchstick Men. Anyway, I love Sam Rockwell. He brought so much character to Frank, just like so much personality. Because in the book, like I said, like you get a feel for the kind of guy Frank is, but Sam Rockwell just brings him to life in a whole nother way. And I just love seeing Sam Rockwell on screen. He's just so charismatic. Even like in this movie, he's playing a sleazebag, and yet even so, I couldn't like hate his character because I just love Rockwell so much. And then we have Alison Lohman, who plays Angela. I consider myself an Alison Lohman fan, but then I realized I haven't really seen much of her stuff. But what I have seen her in, I like. She's basically like retired from acting at this point, but she's great in this. She showed up to the audition dressed as like a teenage boy, and Ridley Scott thought she really was like 14 years old, when in reality, she's 22. Yeah, but she's very believable as this teenager. And then we see her in the end, and Roy realizes that she's not a teenager at all, and she's an adult. But yeah, I was very impressed with her acting in this. And also, I wanted to mention she's in the movie called Drag Me to Hell, which is a Sam Raimi movie. That's a great movie. You guys should definitely watch it. It's typical to Sam Raimi's style, where it's comedic, and some people I know like comedy in their horror movies, but then other people don't. They want it to just be a straight horror movie, whereas this one is comedic. But anyway, it's been a few years since I've seen it, but I've seen it multiple times, and it's one of my favorites, so you should check that out. And it's with Alison Lohman, and Justin Long. And before we get into the details of this, it's interesting because I love watching movies about con men. The Sting is one of my all-time favorite movies. Not only is it about con artists, but it also has Robert Redford and Paul Newman, and Paul Newman especially is one of my favorites. Once again, I have covered him in Cool Hand Luke, The Hustler, and HUD. And then Robert Redford, I mean, come on. But yeah, I really enjoy movies about con artists, and Hollywood always has you cheering for him, and they seem like the good guy, because in the movies, the people they're conning are usually bad guys. But it was interesting because I read FlimFlam Man last year by Jennifer Vogel, and she is the daughter of like an actual real life grifter, paper hanger. And so it gave you a look into the reality of what it's like to know someone who's a con artist. Anyway, I just thought I would share that. And I did enjoy FlimFlam Man. It was made into a movie with Sean Penn, but I actually never ended up seeing the movie. So I never did a book first movie, but I'm glad I read the book nonetheless. And so to talk about Roy in the book, he is not very likable. Right from the start, we see him and Frank hustling people that are poor or desperate, or they've had a loved one die recently, and just very vulnerable in these vulnerable positions. And so Roy and Frank take advantage of that and take their money. And so right from the start, you're just like, man, like these guys suck. There's also a con early on in the book where they do the lottery ticket con, which is also in the movie, but we'll get to that because it's a little different. But Roy gets the ticket and he has the numbers be almost the same as the winning numbers from yesterday. He has the ticket and changes the date. He drops it at a laundromat. A woman sees it. She thinks that they have won the lower prize because they have like 5 of the 6 numbers right. And so in the book, they won like 50 grand, I think. And so she's like, oh, we'll go cash in this ticket and we'll split the earnings. But he's like, well, actually I can't because I need to leave tonight. And I also just can't, my wife can't know that I won a lottery ticket here in this city because she thinks I'm in a different city for a guy's vacation when really I'm here in this city seeing a woman I'm having an affair with. And so he just has this complicated story as to why he can't go with her to get the money for the ticket. And so the woman is like, okay, I'll just pay you out of my own bank account and then tomorrow I'll go get the money for the ticket. And so she gives him everything she has left in her bank account, which is like over $6,000. And she feels bad because she's like, oh, sorry, this isn't anywhere close to the $25,000 that would be yours, but this was all I had. And also this woman has like 5 kids. She is clearly not well off. She might have even been a single parent. I can't remember now. But yeah, Roy takes the money from her and then they go on their way. And Roy kind of talks about the guilt he feels, but he doesn't feel so guilty that he gives the money back or something, right? Like he still takes her money. And so I was just like, wow, like what a terrible person. And then yeah, the very first con, not the very first, but like one of the early cons we see in the book again is them taking advantage of a woman whose husband has recently died. Yeah, so just not showing them to be good people. In the book, we also learn more about Roy and Heather's relationship. And so Heather was 19, Roy was in his early 20s, and they met at a bar and like they hit it off and she's like, okay, I'm gonna go dance. And he's like, okay, cool, I'll wait for you at the bar. And then while she's dancing though, like, she's being all sexy and these guys come up and they're dancing with her and Roy starts to get jealous. And so he walks up to them and he tries to cut in and the guys are basically, like beat it like she's ours. And Roy gets incredibly jealous and then he beats the guy up and he breaks an arm. And Heather, meanwhile, is just like loving all the drama that Roy is causing and she ends up going home with him. They live together, they get married, and then a few months later, she tells him she is pregnant. We don't learn much about their relationship, but apparently it was just very similar to the way in which they met, where like they would go to bars, he was violent, and she would do things to get him jealous, so it was just a bad relationship. And then when she tells him she is pregnant, he ends up hitting her multiple times, and he specifies this, he never hit her in the stomach, but still. And in the book, he's like, because she left that same night, and in the book, he's like, but it wasn't the hitting because she would have left me anyway because our relationship was just no good. And I don't know if it was him trying to make it seem like it wasn't that bad that he hit her, but so that right there, another thing where it's like, wow, like, so Roy was just more violent and had more of a temper in the book. And yeah, that's an example right there. So Roy in the movie is definitely more likable. However, he does, when he's talking about Heather, he does say the line, she left me with a black eye, which I gave her, and a bun in the oven, which could have been anybody's. And the movie just kind of glosses over that part where it's like, oh, he gave her a black eye. Move on, never talk about it again. And as bad as that is, obviously in the book it was worse. And then also the lottery con. So this doesn't happen in the movie until Angela is with him, and this is one of the early cons he teaches her. And so she gets the ticket, and then the money they win in the movie is only $600, so far less. And then she has a story about how she can't go with the woman to get the earnings because like her mom wants her home or whatever. And so the woman gives her $300 out of her bank account. And then Angela, goes back to Roy and she's super happy and super excited, and Roy's very proud of her. But then he's like, okay, now make up a reason to go give that money back to that woman. And Angela is just like, what? And he's like, hey, I wouldn't be a good dad unless I had you give the money back to her. And so Angela does. And so not only were they conning her for less money, they end up giving the money back. So that right there, again, makes you like Roy more than you had in the book. And in the book, like I said, you see them conning these vulnerable people, whereas in the movie, you see them con that couple in the beginning, but then from then on, you only see them working the Chuck con, which we'll get to. And so yeah, I think by not seeing their everyday hustles of these innocent people, you kind of forget that they're bad people because you're not seeing it every day. You're just seeing how they're setting Chuck up, you know? And Chuck isn't exactly likable either, so you don't really feel that bad for him. And I do need to talk about Saif, who is a character from the book. So Frank says how there's this guy he knows who runs a fake art racket, and Frank wants to get in on it, and he says how he's known this guy for 2 years and they should work with him. But Roy is very adamant that they not work with anybody because you don't know if you can trust people and it's just too risky. However, after he brings Angela on a con, after that, Frank is like, okay, well, you know, you can't use that excuse anymore because you brought Angela along. And so Frank agrees to do the art racket thing with Saif. And so they do that for a while and they're making money. It's going well. And whenever they see Saif, he's like, you know, like, I would love to learn how to be a matchstick man and you should teach me the ways. But Roy is just still against it. And he's like, no, we're doing this art thing with you, but that's it. And so as far as the whole airport scene, in the book, he is with Angela, Roy is with Angela, and then he gets a call from Frank being like, hey, I've got a live one. We got to do, you know, they have a name for each of these different cons. And so he's like, you know, we got to do this switch with this guy because he's ready right now. You got to show up right now and we can make a ton of money. And so Roy has no choice but to bring Angela. And so he tells her to provide the distraction because in this hustle, they like switch briefcases and that's how they make the money. And so she's distracting them while Roy is able to switch the briefcase. And then the guy walks off with a briefcase that is just filled with newspaper instead of money. And so this happens in the book and it goes smoothly. And they meet up with Frank afterwards and he is not happy that Roy brought Angela along because, as I said, Roy had been so against having Saif involved and now suddenly he brings Angela. And we also learned that Angela has a record because she was arrested the year prior for stealing gum and like putting up a fight with the policeman. But aside from that, like the con itself goes smoothly. Whereas in the movie, so this was being set up for a while. They were meeting this guy named Chuck and they were setting him up to eventually pull this con, but the movie shows it as being more of like a semi-long con. And they had a set date for when they were going to meet at the airport to pull this off. However, Roy's with Angela and Frank calls and he's like, Chuck moved it up a day. We have to do it today. You have to show up like right now. And so same as the book, he brings Angela, even though Frank didn't know that because Frank didn't know about Angela at this point. At least they don't want Roy to think Frank knows, but of course he does. Anyway, so same things happen. She causes the distraction. They switch suitcases. It goes well at the start, but then as Roy and Angela are driving away, Chuck shows up in the parking garage and he chases them. And so it's this exciting scene, but eventually Roy and Angela get away. But now we know that Chuck is fully aware that they conned him. And this all comes full circle because then at the end of the movie, Roy and Angela are out and they come home and they see Chuck there with Frank, who he has beaten up. And he tells him how, you know, Chuck has a gun and he's like, you're going to give me back my money. And then from now on, I'm going to get a cut of everything you make. And Roy tells him like, I'm retiring. I'm not doing this anymore. And Chuck's is like, you're not going to retire. You're going to keep doing this and I'm getting part of your money. And so Roy tells Angela to go get the money from, in the book, he has this horse statue he keeps money in. In the movie, it's a dog instead, and he also has a gun in the statue. So Angela goes over to where the statue is with the money, but instead she pulls the gun out. And so she's crying, pointing the gun at Chuck, telling him, you know, to stop this. And ultimately, Angela ends up shooting Chuck. And so then Roy has Frank take Angela and he's like, get her somewhere safe, get her away from here. We'll tell the cops that I shot Chuck. He goes back inside. Chuck isn't there. Turns out he wasn't dead. And he hits Roy in the back of the head and Roy is knocked out. He wakes up in a hospital. There are policemen there. They tell them that Chuck was found dead out in the front lawn. So shortly after he hit Roy, he died. But of course he didn't actually die because Chuck is in on the con. Anyway, they're like, you know, why was this guy at your house and why was he dead? What happened? And Roy is like, I want to talk to my doctor. And so Dr. Klein shows up and then he gives Dr. Klein his bank information and he tells him to use his money to like get Angela somewhere safe. And then after that, it's been a few days apparently, and he wakes up and he sees that this wasn't a real hospital at all. He's just in one of those like cargo things on a roof. And then he goes and he checks his dog statue. It's empty. He goes to see Heather, his ex-wife, and he's like, where's Angela? And she's like, there is no Angela. We don't have a kid together. I lost the baby when I was pregnant. You're crazy. And then he goes to check his safety deposit box and it's empty. Oh, and when he checks the dog in the movie, he finds a letter from Frank where Frank basically explains what happens and is apologizing, but in a jerky way. And so he realizes that they were conning him to get his huge savings account. Whereas in the book ending, so Frank asks if they can pull one last con before Roy retires. Roy agrees, and so they decide to con Saif. So they tell Saif, like, okay, we're gonna let you in on this and we'll help you with a con. But because you're the new guy, you need to front the money. And so Saif fronts like $30,000. And the plan is they're gonna do like a drug deal. They're gonna con the drug dealer though, because they're gonna have a fake cop show up and the drug dealer is gonna freak out, run away, and then they will have the drugs and the money. However, this does not go as planned though, because when the fake cop shows up, which is Frank dressed up as a cop, the drug dealer doesn't buy it, and he knows, he's like, that's not even a real cop. And, you know, he gets Saif to break down and tell them the truth, and then drama ensues, and Roy is shot. Frank tells Saif to run for it, and so Saif runs off, and then that's the end of the con, because they're like, sweet, we got Saif's money, and the drug dealer was in on it, and so this has all been planned just to get Saif's money. So they're all feeling good about, you know, getting this guy's money, and they're leaving. However, when they leave the building, they see Saif there. Turns out Saif is an undercover cop, and he's there with a bunch of other cops, and he's like, I got you. More drama ensues. Angela lunges at Saif. Roy is knocked out. He eventually wakes up in a hospital, and Frank tells him that in the drama, Angela ended up killing Saif, so she killed a cop. And she is now in prison, and her bail is $500,000. Previously in the story, I didn't mention it, but previously, Angela was arrested, which this was all faked too, because he meets her outside of the police station, so she never actually was arrested. But so they con Roy into thinking Angela had been arrested previously for trying to run a con that Roy had taught her, and she's like in hysterics because the couple hours she was in jail were traumatizing for her. And so flash forward now, Roy is thinking about how Angela has been in prison for a few days while he was unconscious. And he's like, I gotta bail her out. Like, it was traumatizing when she was there for a few hours. I can only imagine what's going on right now for her. And so he gives Frank his bank information, tells him to get the $500,000 out, bail Angela out, and get her somewhere safe. A few days pass, and he's like, why haven't I heard from Frank or Angela? And so he ends up escaping the hospital, which was real in the book. Same thing where he checks his statue, it's empty. He goes to see Heather. She said she had aborted the baby, never had it. They don't have a daughter named Angela. He calls the bank account, or the bank, and they tell him what he knows he will hear and that it is empty. And there is no note from Frank in this explaining things. Instead, Roy just, you know, pieces it all together, and he's like, wow, like they totally got me. And he's left penniless. And then the story after the con is very different in book and movie. So in the movie, we flash forward a year and we see that he is a carpet salesman, and Angela and her boyfriend walk in, and Angela had not known he worked there. So you can see she is clearly uncomfortable, and Roy is, you know, just making different remarks to her. And then she finds a way to get alone with him. You know, she tells her boyfriend to go, you know, do whatever. And they kind of have this closure. You know, Roy gets closure from this experience. And Angela tells him that Frank didn't give her a fair cut of the money, and he took the majority of it, and how that was just a one-time thing for her, and that she is straight now, and that this guy really is her boyfriend, not a mark, and, you know, whatever. And she kind of apologizes for taking Frank's money, and then Frank says the line about how, you know, you didn't take it, I gave it to you, which is what Frank would say. Sorry, I mean Roy. Their names are like so bland and normal that I keep getting them mixed up. Anyway, Roy. I've been talking about Roy as the carpet salesman. Sorry if I've been saying Frank. But anyway, Roy says the line about how you didn't take it from me, I gave it to you. And that's what Roy would say about being a con artist. Like, I don't take people's money, they give it to me. Which, you know, is just a way to make him feel better about what he does. Anyway, they have this moment where they kind of get closure and are able to move past what happened. And then Roy goes home, and we see this cashier he has been flirting with throughout the whole movie. She is at home, and she is pregnant, and they are clearly together, expecting a baby. So it seems in the movie that the whole thing, him being conned by Frank and Angela, was like a blessing in disguise, because it led him to a better life. Whereas in the book, after this happens, he goes to this diner, a diner he and Frank would often go to. And he sees these college kids pulling a card hustle, which he and Frank had been doing there. And so they try to get him in on, you know, being hustled, and he goes along with it. And he obviously knows they're trying to hustle him, but he doesn't even care. And when they ask him how much money he wants to bet down, he just empties out all his pockets and he puts down whatever money he has, his hospital tag, you know, receipts, whatever. And of course they take it all from him. And he is just very like apathetic and just has no emotion at this point. And the college kids are like, you know, you should be more careful because you shouldn't be so trusting. People might take more from you than we did. And then from there, he goes back to his sandwich and he realizes he now has no money to pay for this, but he just doesn't care. And that's how it ends, which, yeah, not as happy an ending, obviously. But I felt bad for Roy for losing Angela specifically because he cared about her and he loved her and thought it was his daughter. And so you feel bad for him. But I think he's gonna be okay because he's a Matchstick Man and he knows how to make something from nothing. I think he will continue being a con artist. Unlike the movie, he'll get back on his feet again. And book versus movie, I will say in the movie, it made less sense why he needed to give Dr. Klein his bank information. Whereas the book made that very clear. Frank was like, you know, Angela, her bail is $500,000. Like, we don't have that money. And so he had to give him his banking information. Whereas in the movie, I was sort of confused why he felt the need to give Dr. Klein his bank information. So the book did a better job with that, I would say. And yeah, it's funny how Hollywood always feels the need, not always, but oftentimes Hollywood feels the need to tack on a happy ending when in the book it hadn't been happy, but the movie feels the need to change that. And that's one reason why I like books, is that maybe they're less predictable at times and they're not always the happy ending you tend to get with Hollywood. Having said that, I did enjoy the ending of Matchstick Men, the movie, and I enjoyed seeing Roy living a better life, going straight, having a baby on the way, and so I did enjoy that. Despite my complaints about Hollywood making everything happy, I did like it. I did like the ending of the book too, though, and I like the ambiguity where we don't really know what's going to happen. And also in the book, we learn that, you know, because Roy goes to Frank's old apartment and he's like trying to find Frank, and the neighbor comes out and he's like, oh, the guy who used to live here, he moved out yesterday and he had this young woman with him who had a foul mouth. Roy is just left to assume that Angela and Frank have teamed up and are conning people. In the book, Angela just wasn't as sweet as she was in the movie, because obviously we get that scene in the end and, you know, she's not this foul-mouthed woman who's still conning people. So we assume, you know, she could be lying to Roy. Maybe she is conning people. We don't know. But she did seem to be telling the truth. Anyway, I will say that the movie wins on this one. It is just so fun, so entertaining, heartfelt, and the acting. I just love the cast so much. Like, these are all actors where just seeing them on screen makes me happy. And yeah, and maybe also nostalgic reasons, because I remember so well this movie, watching it when I was younger, and the ending, I was just so blown away. So partly nostalgic reasons, but it is also just a great movie, and highly recommend. If you haven't watched it, you should. Even if you've listened to this and you already know the whole plot, I think you will still enjoy the movie because it is very fun, very entertaining. The characters are wonderful. So yeah, highly recommend. And the book was good too. And it's one I would recommend if you enjoy stories like this. But the movie wins though, ultimately. And that wraps it up on Matchstick Men. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Comment down below your thoughts. What is your favorite movie about con artists, by the way? There are so many out there. Mine, like I said, is probably The Sting, but that's kind of for personal reasons and nostalgia reasons again. But what is your favorite movie about con artists? And join me next week. I'm going to be posting a book versus movie video for Their Eyes Were Watching God, which is a movie with Halle Berry, and then the book was written back in the 30s by Zora Neale Hurston, and it's a popular one that's often read in high schools and stuff. So yeah, that will be next week. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.